good morning friends and students. In this video I am going to read the question. This question answer is very long, so video will be very large, so I will only read, and all the time at first I read for the audible purpose and then I explain that. Okay, so in this video I will only read this question with answers. What is the question? Question is, write short note on norm reference test importance and use. It was asked in June 2011. Or write short note on norm reference evaluation. It was asked in December 2011. Now let's read the answer. Norm reference test (NRTs) compare a person's score against the score of a group of people who have already taken the same exam, called the norming group. When we see scores in the paper which reported schools' scores as a percentage, the Lincoln school ranked at the 49th percentile, or when we see our child's score reported that way, Jamal scored at the 63rd percentile, the test is usually an NRT. Most achievement NRTs are multiple choice tests. Some also include open-ended short answer questions. The questions on these tests mainly reflect the content of nationally used textbooks, not the local curriculum. This means that students may be tested on things once local schools or state education department decided were not so important and therefore were not taught. Commercial National Norm Referenced Achievement Tests include the California Achievement Test (CAT), Comprehensive Test of Basic Skills (CTBS), which includes the Terra Nova, Iowa Test of Basic Skills (ITBS), Iowa Test of Basic Skills (ITBS), and Tests of Academic Proficiency (TAP), Metropolitan Achievement Test (MAT), and Stanford Achievement Test (SAT), not to be confused with the college admissions SAT IQ. Cognitive ability, school readiness, and developmental screening tests are also NRTs. Creating the bell curve. NRTs are designed to rank order test takers, that is, to compare students' scores. A commercial norm reference test does not compare all the students who take the test in a given year. Instead, test makers select a sample from the target student population, say 9th graders. The test is mounted on this sample, which is supposed to fairly represent the entire target population, all 9th grades in the nation. Students' scores are then reported in relation to the scores of this norming group. To make comparing easier, test makers create exams in which the results end up looking at list somewhere like a bell-shaped curve. Now it is given, test makers make the test so that most students will score near the middle and only a few will score low. Scores are usually reported as percentile ranks. The scores range from 1st percentile to 99th percentile, with the average student score set at the 50th percentile. If Jamal scored at the 63rd percentile, means he scored higher than 63 of the test takers, the norming group. Scores also can be reported as grade equivalence, steepness, and normal curve equivalence. One more question, right or wrong, can cause a big change in the student's score. In some cases, having one more correct answer can cause a student reported percentile score to jump more than 10 points. It is very important to know how much difference the percentile rank would be caused by getting one or two more questions right. In making an NRT, it is often more important to choose questions that sort people along the curve that it is to make sure that the content covered by the test is adequate. The tests sometimes emphasize a small and meaningless differences among test takers. Since the tests are made to sort students, most of the things everyone knows are not tested. Questions may be obscure or tricky in order to help a rank order to test takers. Tests can be biased. Some questions may favor one kind of a student or another for reasons that have nothing to do with the subject area being tested. Non-school knowledge that is more commonly learned by middle or upper class children is often included in tests. To help make the bell curve, test makers usually eliminate questions that students with low overall scores might get right, but those with high overall scores get wrong. Thus, most questions which favor minority groups are eliminated. NRTs usually have to be completed in a time limit. Some students do not finish even if they know this material. This can be particularly unfair to students whose first language is not English or who have learning disabilities. This speededness is one way test makers sort people out. How accurate is that test score? The items on the test are only a sample of the whole select area. There are often thousands of questions that could be asked, but tests may have just a few dozen questions. A test score is therefore an estimate of how well the student would do if she could be asked all the possible questions. Now it is given. All tests have measurement error. No test is perfectly reliable. A score that appears as an absolute number, say Jamal 63, really is an estimate. For example, Jamal's true score is probably between 56 and 70, but it could be even further off. Sometimes results are reported in score bands, which show the range within which a test taker's true score probably lies. There are many other possible causes of measurement error. A student can be having a bad day. Test taking conditions often are not the same from place to place. They are not adequately standardized. Different versions of the same test are in fact not quite exactly the same. Sub-scores on tests are even less precise. This is mostly because there are often very few items on the sub-test. A score band for Jonata's math sub-test might show that her score is between the 33rd and 99th percentile because only a handful of questions were asked. Scores for young children are much less reliable than for older students. This is because young children modes and attention are more variable. Also, young children develop quickly and unevenly. So even an accurate score today would be wrong next month. What do score increases mean? If our child's or our school's score goes up on a norm reference test, does that mean she knows more or the school is better? Maybe yes, maybe not. Schools cannot teach everything. They teach some facts, some procedures, some concepts, some skills, but not others. Often, schools focus most on what is tested and stop teaching many things that are not tested. When scores go up, it does not mean the students know more. It means they know more of what is on that test. For example, history achievement test A could have a question on Bacon's rebellion, a rebellion by black slaves and white indentured servants against the plantation owners in colonial Virginia. Once teacher know Bacon's rebellion is covered on the exam, they are more likely to teach about it. But if those same students are given history test B, which does not ask about Bacon's rebellion but does ask about Shays' rebellion, which the teacher has not taught, the students will not score as well. Teaching to the test explains why scores usually go down when a new test is used. A district or a state usually uses an NRT for 5 to 10 years. Each year, the score goes up as teachers become familiar with what is on the test. When a new test is used, the scores suddenly drop. The students don't know less, it is just that different things are now being tested. Can all the children score above average? Politicians often call for all students to score above the national average. This is not possible. NRTs are constructed so that half the population is below the midpoint or average score. Expecting all students to be above the 50-ish percentile is like expecting all teams in a basketball league to win more than half their games. However, because the tests are used for years and because schools teach to them, there are times when far more than half the students score above average. Why use norm reference tests? To compare students, it is often easiest to use a norm reference test because they were created to rank test takers. If there are limited places such as in a gifted and talented program and choices have to be made, it is tempting to use a test constructed to rank students, even if the ranking is not very meaningful and gives out some qualified children. NRTs are a quick snapshot of some of the things most people expect students to learn. They are relatively cheap and easy to administer. If they were only used as one additional piece of information and not much importance was put on them, they would not be much of a problem. Many mistakes can be made by relying on test scores to make educational decisions. Every major maker of NRTs tells schools not to use them as the basis for making decisions about retention, graduation, or replacement. The test makers know that their tests are not good enough to use that way. Norm reference testing. Now it is given that norm reference testing is integral to the practice of psychological and educational testing. Originated in the work of modern statistics, this assessment method assumes that human traits and characteristics such as intelligence, academic achievement, and behavior are distributed along a normal probability or bell-shaped curve, hereafter referred to as the normal curve. The normal curve represents the norm or average performance of a population at the scores that are above and below the average within that population. The norms for a test include percentile ranks, standard scores, and other statistics for the norm group on which the test was standardized. A certain percentage of the norm group falls within various ranges along the normal curve. Depending on the range within which test scores fall, scores correspond to various descriptors, ranging from deficient to superior. Now this is the graph of the test. Now how it is taken, like percentile ranks, T score, score ST, skill score. The figure is a modified version of a graph found on. So it is the website, from there it can be also found. So now in this graph you can see that I will explain in you when I will explain it into Hindi. A norm-reference test in RT compares an examinee's test performance to those of the examinees same age peers from the test norm group. This comparison permits a more meaningful interpretation of the individual's score. An examinee's test score is compared to that of a norm group by converting the examinee's raw scores into derived total skill scores. As shown in figure, derived scores correspond to the normal curve, thus providing an interpretive framework for examinees administered the NRT. The norm group can consist of a larger population, such as representative population of children from the United States, that is the national norm group, or it can consist of a smaller, more limited population, such as all children in an individual school or school district, that is the local norm group. Next is the derived scores. The conversion of examinees' raw scores into derived scores provides a system of common metrics that facilitate test interpretation. There are multiple derived scores reported for NRTs. However, the more common ones used for interpretive purposes are standard scores, standard deviations, skill scores, T scores, percentile ranks, age equivalent scores, and grade equivalent scores. A standard score has a statistical mean or average of 100 and conveys how far an examinee's test score varies or deviates from the average of the distribution. The test to which a score varies or deviates from the average is expressed as a standard deviation. For example, a standard score of 115 on a NRT, sorry, it is misprint here, it should be NRT because of the article you know already. NRT, such an intelligence quotient IQ test, is a standard deviation above the mean of 100 and falls within the high average range. A scale scores build information about an examinee's performance on a subdomain or subtest of a, फिर से यहाँ पे होगा NRT. These scores have a mean or average of 10 and a standard deviation of 3 points. Therefore, a scale score of 7 on an NRT subtest indicates that the examinee's skills as measured by the subtest is the one's standard deviation below the mean of 10 and corresponds to the low average range. T scores are a different distribution of the standard scores in that the mean of the distribution is 50 with a standard deviation of 100 points. NRTs assessing behavior typically report T scores. Consequently, a T score of 60 on a behavior rating scale is one standard deviation above the mean of 50 and corresponds to the high average at risk range. Percentile ranks indicate an examinee's position relative to the norm group. A percentile rank is a point in the distribution at or below which a certain percentage of scores falls. A child obtaining a percentile rank of 85 on an intelligence test indicates that the child's performance is equal to or greater than 85% of the child's same age peers in the test of Nongroup. It does not mean the child obtained 85% of items correct on the NRT. Grade and age equivalent scores are two of the most commonly used scores to report test results, yet they are also commonly misunderstood. These scores indicate that a student has attained the same raw scores or number of items correct as the average student of a certain grade or age level in the test's norm group. For example, if a student obtains a grade equivalent score of 4.5 on a test of basic reading skills, this means the student obtained the same raw score as the average student in the 5th month of the 4th grade in the test's norm group. It does not mean the student acquired or demonstrated the same level of proficiency consistent with the curricular expectation as the average student in the 5th month of the 4th grade at the student's school. Likewise, if a student obtains an age equivalent score of 8.0 years on a test of basic reading skills, this means the student obtained the same raw score as the average 8-year-old student in the test's norm group. It does not mean the student acquired or demonstrated the same level of proficiency consistent with curricular expectations as the average 8-year-old student in the student's school. Consequently, grade and age equivalent scores should not be interpreted literally. It is critical that test administrators and consumers understand the meaning and interpretation of these and other derived scores, as misinterpretation can lead to serious consequences for the examinee, including possible misdiagnosis, misclassification, and/or inappropriate educational placement and services. Sattler and Lehman provide further extensive information about these and other derived scores used for testing interpretive purposes. Of note is the fact that NRTs are imperfect by nature. The scores fielded by NRTs are referred to as observed scores versus absolute or true scores. An observed score is one attained by an examinee, whereas a true score is one that is error-free and hypothetical in nature. For this reason, norm-referenced standard test scores have band of errors, which are expressed as either 90% or 95% confidence intervals. The 90% confidence interval indicates the range of standard scores within which an examinee's true score would fall 90 out of 100 times on repeated assessments. Likewise, the 95% confidence interval, a more conservative estimate, indicates the standard score range within which an examinee's true score would fall 95 out of 100 times on repeated assessments. Ornstein describes a number of strengths of NRTs, including but not limited to the following. A. They assume statistical rigor in that they are reliable, that is dependable and stable and valid, that is measure what they are reported to measure. B. The quality of test items is generally high in that they are developed by test experts, pilot tested, and undergo revision prior to publication and use. And C. Administration procedures are standardized and the test items are designed to rank examinees for the purposes of placing them in specific programs or instructional groups. Stewart and Kaminsky report that local norms based on the test performance of students from a specific local have the added advantage of providing meaningful information regarding average performance, for example, in a particular school or school district. These authors report many other advantages of using local norms, including that they decrease the likelihood of bias in educational decision making because students' test performance is compared to other students whose demographic and background factors are similar. In addition, they afford school systems the opportunity to compare data on students' educational outcomes to instructional curricula to which students have already been exposed. Furthermore, local norms are useful in facilitating decisions such as identifying the educational needs for students, determining standards for student progress, and identifying and making decisions about students' eligibility for English as a second language and academically gifted programs. Finally, these norms are useful for identifying students at risk for school failure. The predominant criticism of NRTs is that their content is seldom aligned with curricular content taught in educational settings, with the exception of locally normed tests. Good and Salvia referred to the match between the items on a norm-referenced achievement test and the content taught in a curricular as content validity. The underlying assumption of content validity is that the items on an NRT should correspond to the content of the curriculum taught in a classroom. Results of an NRT devoid of content validity makes it difficult to determine effective interventions that are needed for a student experiencing academic and or behavioral challenges. Also, NRTs do not allow for monitoring academic progress over an extended period of time. Instead, they provide an index of achievement or performance in comparison to a norm group at one specific point in time. Furthermore, an underlying assumption of NRTs is that examinees have had opportunities to acquire skills and experiences comparable to those of examinees in the norm group. Non-reference tests are also concerned about what is being measured, but the degree of concern is less since the domain of content is not the primary focus for score interpretation. In non-reference test development, item selection beyond the requirement that items meet the content specifications is driven by item statistics. Items are needed that are not too difficult or too easy and that are highly discriminating. These are the types of items that contribute most to score spread and enhance test score reliability and validity. With criterion referenced test development, extensive efforts go into ensuring content validity. Item statistics play less a role in item selection, though highly discriminating items are still greatly valued, and sometimes item statistics are used to select items that maximize the discriminating power of a test at the performance standard of interest on the test score scale. Some scholars have argued that there is little difference between non-reference tests and criterion reference test, but this is not true. A good non-reference test is one that will result in a wide distribution of scores on the construct being measured by the test. Without score variability, reliable and valid comparisons of candidates cannot be made. Okay, now this question is over after reading, and now I will explain this question into Hindi in 2 and 3 parts of other videos, and you have to also read it 2 and 3 times so that it can be meaningful for you, because reading is very important. The more you read, you get the idea, the words, the sentence in the examination, and it helps you, and you don't have to think a lot while appearing in the exam and during the examination time in the examination hall, because that time you can create the idea and you will have the chunk of words automatically flowing in your mind. Okay, so by then take care. I will explain them into Hindi in next videos.